the people of the church living a worldly lifestyle. If they cross a few lines, it's okay, as long as they come and confess it, to the priest and, say a couple of Hail Marys and everything. But now the clergy, the priesthood, they're held to quite a high standard, at least on paper. What they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, even whether they're allowed to marry, those types of things. So there's this great schism, this great division between the rulers, the clergy, and just the little people. That, I believe, is the extreme end of this seed idea, the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. If you follow it out to its extreme, you end up with that Catholic clergy laity type of a system. But I believe it can show itself in quite a few different ways, and it can be subtle. And just the idea that people can have, if you're a believer and you're attending church and everything, that's good enough. That your average believer doesn't really need to be a soul winner, doesn't really need to be a witness. That's something, that's the job of the pastor. That's what we pay the preacher for. I think that's touching on the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. I think that's borderline coming into that sort of territory that the Lord hates. I think the Lord hates the idea that we would think, that we would allow it to creep into our church, the idea that your average believer just kind of go to church and be sort of faithful to that, and that's all that the Lord requires. And that as far as any actual ministry that goes on, any service to the Lord, that should be done by the professionals, by the church staff, that type of thing. I think we're touching on the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. I think we can, depending on how it's taught and how it's presented, I think we can touch on the doctrine of the Nicolaitans with the idea of, just the lowly people are paying a tithe to the priestly class, and that the priests are going to live off of that. I think if we're not careful, we can touch on the doctrine of the Nicolaitans as we're looking at that. And I think since the Lord said that he hated it twice, I believe, even if maybe that's not what the doctrine of the Nicolaitans means, because as I said, we're into speculation here. But I believe we ought to be extremely careful about anything that even may be the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. If he's going out of his way to tell us twice that he hates it, then I think we need to take it very, very seriously. So if we were to look here in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1, the elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder, and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being samples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. And I think really what we're seeing in Revelation 2 and 3 is just sort of the practical outworking of the truths that we see here in 1 Peter chapter 5. The elders, those who are the pastors, and Peter is writing to a broad audience. He's writing to those that have scattered, the believers that have scattered throughout the world, and so this is a general epistle. And so he's saying, to the elders which are among you, just among all these different places that this letter will be read, the elders that are among you, I'm speaking to them. I also am an elder, he says, which tells us that elder is kind of an umbrella term, like the word minister. Peter's title is apostle. That he's an apostle. He's not a pastor, he's not an evangelist. Although did he pastor? Probably yes. Did he do the work of an evangelist? Of course he did. But his actual title is apostle. But an apostle is an elder, is what he's saying, and a pastor is an elder. And I believe prophets and evangelists, I think they're elders. So he says to all the elders, the idea here is to the ministers that are among you. I'm going to exhort you. I'm also an elder. I'm a leader. I'm a minister. But he's not just one of them. He's also a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and a particular of the glory that shall be revealed. And the charge is this, feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. So he's passing along something that the Lord gave him. As you read here about feeding the flock, that should kind of take your mind back to that shore where the Lord had built a fire of coals. And Peter has gone fishing. It's after the resurrection. And the Lord is standing there on the shore, and the men recognize him. Peter jumps in the water and swims to the Lord. And as they're sitting there and they're eating, the Lord says, Peter, love us not me more than these. And Peter, of course, says, you know I do. And 3 times the Lord asks Peter if he loves him. And every time Peter says, you know that I do. But all 3 times the Lord says, then feed my sheep. Feed my lambs. Feed my sheep. So this idea of just a pastoral aspect, as a shepherding aspect, was given to Peter by the Lord. And Peter is passing that on to others. If you're an elder, if you're a minister in the church, then we're charged to feed the flock of God that's among us. And then he says, taking the oversight thereof. And that oversight, that implies sort of the role of a bishop, somebody who is what maybe today you might call a head pastor or a lead pastor, taking oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. And then he says, neither as being lords over God's heritage. So there's a counterbalance. You're in charge. You have to have some authority if you're going to have oversight. That takes authority. Somebody has to be in charge. But there's a counterbalance but don't lord it over God's flock. So I believe what we have in Revelation 2 and 3 is a place where the authority and responsibility of a single person, a single man in each local church, that is established in Revelation 2 and 3. But counterbalance to that, because all doctrines have to be held in balance, the counterbalance is, but don't go into this doctrine of Nicolaitans, where the clergy are conquering the people. They're ruling over the people with a rod of iron. That's not how it's supposed to be. Shepherds don't drive flocks. They're not supposed to. You don't see shepherds getting on horses and cracking whips behind a flock of sheep. They would just scatter. That wouldn't work. You can drive cattle. You can get behind cattle and you can shout and crack a whip and you can get the cattle all to move in a certain direction. But a good shepherd gets in front of the flock of sheep and leads, walks in the way that the flock should go, and those sheep will follow him. If you try to drive sheep the way that you would drive cattle, you're going to scatter the flock. It's not going to work. And so he's saying here, you do have to lead, you do have to take charge, but do it the way that a shepherd does. Do it by taking the lead and having them follow you. Not by forcing people, not by manipulation or by bullying people. And that's something that happens quite a bit, unfortunately, in many churches, is you get an unbalanced view of the authority of the pastor. That's been a major problem in Baptist churches, where you have the one problem of the pastor has no authority and a deacon board is running everything. That's wrong. That's unbiblical. That Revelation 2 and 3 proves that that's unbiblical. The Lord is not saying unto the deacon board of the church in Pergamos, I have a few things against y'all. That's not what he said. He does not mean for a board of elders or a board of deacons to rule a church. That's unbiblical. But on the other side, the other extreme, if you have a pastor that is a bully and the kind of pastor that claims to have so much authority that you feel like you can't go, there's a classic example, like you can't even go and buy a car from a used car lot without calling and asking the pastor's approval or opinion on it. That's silly. That's ridiculous. That's not healthy. If someone's view of their pastor is